I'm assuming there's some clause that says the person who murdered you can't get your stuff. That's pretty common, like even in our society.
I don't think that's a will thing. I think that's just a general legal society.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, because otherwise everyone would just go around killing everybody for the shit in their will.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Booked on Fantasy podcast, and Happy New Year.
I'm Addison.
I'm Lorraine, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through book shows and movies, but with the heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are discussing Queen of Shadows, chapters 42 through 47, and wow. What an exciting set of chapters. I loved every minute of how Aelin's plan with Arobynn unfolded, and I just derived top tier satisfaction from everything, starting with the bank plot to the actual ending of Arobynn. It was all amazing.
Every single thing that happened, I would be like, ooh. And then the next thing that happened, I'd be like, oh. And it just was this boom, 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 all the way to the end, especially with that Rowan shit. That one was more like, ooh. Like that was like an ugly ooh.
I think my jaw was on the floor, like pretty much this entire set of chapters.
Yep. Your jaw and Aelin's hands were on the floor after Rowan threw them off of him.
Oh, yeah. Rough. As a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters 42 through 47 specifically, but there will definitely be spoilers for all the books we've covered so far. This includes Tab, TOG, Calm, and Huff. Otherwise, the series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. If you are reading along with us, then next week's Queen of Shadows episode will cover chapters 48 through 56. Next, Addison, where are we at with the Onyx Storm countdown?
All right, today is January 1st. Happy New Year. And as of this new year, 2025, there are only 20 days until Onyx Storm is released. Woo! We cannot wait.
All right, so let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report for chapter summaries, and then we will dive into an analysis and offer theories for each chapter. And finally, we will share our favorite moments. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
With the Queen's exacting justice, I will. Chapter 42. The trio arrived at the Assassin's Keep. It was finally time to pay the debt owed to Arobynn, and I'm not just talking about the Vaal commander Aelin owed him. They take Stefan, aka the Vaal commander, down to the dungeons, and Arobynn orders Rowan and Aelin to leave, which they silently but strongly object to. Arobynn finished the interrogation and killed Stefan, but not before taking the Blackstone ring and pocketing it to study later. Dinner took an interesting turn when Aelin started completely ignoring everyone so she could flirt with Rowan using their mind-to-mind speak, which sparked Arobynn's ire. But don't worry, it's not like he's a lethal psychotic grudge holder or anything. Anyways, the chapter ends with Arobynn asking Aelin if she has had fun these past weeks wrecking all of his investments. Chapter 43. Arobynn was pissed about Aelin's shenanigans, so he suggested they go have a little chat and negotiate peace terms. As always, when it came to Arobynn, the conversation was laced with lies and truth, truth and lies. Aelin told Arobynn they could work together to kill the king, but on her terms. But before that, as a show of good faith, Arobynn could give her her family necklace, and surprisingly, he forked it over. And then Aelin had the third and final word key. It took everything Aelin had not to run out of the room right then and there, but she instead continued making moves in her game with Arobynn. As she prepared to leave, Arobynn stopped her and said, "One more thing." He moved as if to embrace her, and then, faster than she could react, he slid the wordstone ring on her finger. Chapter 44. It was finally time for Aelin to admit her true feelings, and so she did with these words. "I love you, Arobynn Hamel." Psych! And the Oscar for this year's Best Actress goes to Aelin Ash River Galathinius. A bunch of shit happened in this chapter, so I'm going to lay it out for you. Aelin was only pretending to be controlled by the Vaal ring because she and Rowan had cleverly hatched a plan with Stefan to trick Arobynn. If that wasn't enough, they had to deal with the Amulet of Orinth, aka the third and final word key, And that thing was crazy powerful, like lightning and thunder outside kind of powerful. Ultimately, they ended up just hiding it under the floorboards for now. Later, Aelin was on watch on the rooftop of her apartment, and Rowan decided to go up there and talk to her. And when he saw how devastated she was, he couldn't help but go to her. And before he knew what was happening, he was holding her, and she was stroking his cheek, and their eyes were locked on each other, and they were about to... Faster than she could process, he yanked her wrist away and said, "Don't touch me like that." And if that wasn't a verbal bucket of ice water, then I don't know what is. But wait, there's more. Lysandra was ready. It was finally time to avenge her lost love. Lysandra carefully drew the knife from under Arobynn's pillow. Lightning gleamed on the blade. For Wesley, for Sam, for Aelin, and for herself, for the child she'd been and the woman she'd become, her heart in shreds, she sat up and sliced the knife across Arobynn's throat. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Chapter 45. The king was interrogating a man about where the rebels were hiding out. The Vogue prince inside of Dorian gripped him tightly, forcing him to watch as his own hands gripped a cruel-looking device, fitting it onto the man's face, and began tightening. Dorian tried to resist, but his body had betrayed him, and the Vogue prince shoved every bit of delight he felt at the man's suffering into Dorian. Dorian begged, but his hands did not stop, and the man went on screaming. Chapter 46. Today, Aelin decided it was already forfeited to hell, and there was no use in trying to salvage it. They received official news of the death of Arobynn Hamel and were called to the Assassin's Keep by Tern, Harding, and Mullen. On the way to the keep, things between Rowan and Aelin were awkward as fuck. But for the first time in TOG history, I'm okay with this. She would think about that later. Once they arrived, Aelin fortified herself. She only had to wear the mask of Selena Sardothian one last time, and then she could bury her forever. Without hesitating, she stormed the front steps of the keep and kicked open the front door. Chapter 47. For the last time Selena Sardothian entered the Assassin's Keep, Tern, Harding, and Mullen watched her like a hawk to try and catch her slip up about her involvement in Arobynn's death. But the only thing more ironclad than her alibi was her will and determination. The master of the bank arrived and the will was read. They all sat in stunned silence as the master informed them that everything was to go to Selena Sardothian. Well, except for Clarice. She started bitching immediately. But Aelin kept up the charade, a picture of shock and surprise. And by this point, I was really starting to think that she should have gone into acting instead. Selena kicks everyone out, but Tern, Harding, and Mullen begged like the rutting cowards they were, so she agreed to sell the guild and the properties to them. While they waited for the master of the bank to return with the sale papers, Adie, Rowan, and Aelin all went down to the dungeons, where Aelin confirmed that all those trips to the bank were to switch the wills, and that now they had the money they needed for Terrasen's army. It was then that she took the sword of Orinth from Adie, and when she raised her head, there was only icy determination in her remarkable ash of her eyes, a queen exacting her justice. And then she severed Arobynn's head from his body, just to be sure. And that concludes the book report.
Wow. Thank you.
Wow. Literally, wow.
I don't have anything else to say beyond that. I'm just shocked, per usual. So let's dive into the analysis, starting with our overarching thoughts.
Wow. A lot of overarching thoughts. I actually started typing so many overarching thoughts that it just became analysis. And I was like, okay, wait, let me back up. So first, let me just say obligatory fuck Arobynn Hamel with a middle finger emoji, okay? So that way you know we mean it in the meanest way possible.
Big vulgar gesture.
Big vulgar gesture energy, okay? And I just have to say, man, what an absolutely satisfying conclusion to Arobynn's storyline in part 1 of Queen of Shadows. I just love how it all came together and the unexpected twists and turns. I've said it before, but specifically to this series, SJM is a master of planting seeds along the way, and part 1 of this book was no exception to that. But not to rain on anybody's parade, per usual, pessimistic Addison is here. It's great that they got rid of Arobynn, but in reality, he was the least of their problems. Compared to everything else that we're up against, it doesn't resolve very much. So it's great that they got all his money and all that, but for the overall plot, I still feel extremely anxious, nauseous, nervous about our characters' futures and how they're going to handle things as they progress.
I do think the money thing is a huge problem.
That's true.
That now they have solved. And I think it makes it much easier to move forward with the next things that they need to get done. now that they have money for an army secured, at the very least. But I agree that there are many other things that they're going to need to work through that are much more problematic than killing an assassin man. Overall, I think we have finally wrapped up the loose ends in Rifthold with all the people of Aelin's past, and we can continue moving along with the larger plot. That makes sense considering this set of chapters ends part 1 of Queen of Shadows, and with that, it signifies the end of the Selena Sardathian era as Aelin finally puts everything about her past to rest. Aside from that, this plan of Aelin's and how SJM crafted all the events was immaculate, as you stated. I was just shocked by the fake reading thing with Arobynn, and I literally never figured out what Aelin was doing. And I attribute that to some wonderfully crafty writing, and I was on the edge of my seat the whole time reading these set of chapters. All right, so let's get into our actual chapter analysis, starting with chapter 42.
The time has finally come for Aelin to face off with Arobynn, and immediately, based on the description, you can tell how precarious everything is because she's got Aelin and Rowan with her. She's using Nesrin's help, and she has Chaol. There's rebels across the street just in case. And so I don't think I realized how dangerous and like precarious everything was until you start realizing there's like an army of people to do this one thing. Like they're just going to dinner. Well, just going to dinner, quote unquote. But I was like immediately on high alert. I was like, oh shit, this is for real, for real.
Oh yeah, because it's Arobynn fucking Hamel. You never know what he's going to do. One of the first things that stuck out to me when they arrive at the keep is when Aelin tells Rowan and Aelin to keep their mouths shut, especially with the Valg commander. I'm assuming this is because the Valg could very easily take control and then maybe communicate back somehow to the other Valg about who was there and what they were actually doing. I also thought it was interesting that Aelin was using a nondescript sword while they brought the Valg in because Arobynn already knows who he is. So is he avoiding using anything identifiable or that would stick out when around the Valg? That detail was kind of interesting to me because I was like, why would it matter what sword they used?
That's actually a really good catch. I didn't even notice that. I would assume your logic is correct on both. Probably in case something happens with the Valg and it gets away, they don't want him to communicate that. And probably just risky, I would assume, because it's a pretty famous sword. Also, maybe you don't want to risk it getting taken by Arobynn or, you know, possessed by him or whatever. Possessed, that doesn't that word. Didn't want him to take possession of it either.
Arobynn puts on a good show wearing green for Terrasen, intentionally meant to muddle what his true intentions were. And Arobynn is really just so sinister. The skin oil, wearing green, knowing exactly who and what Aelin and Rowan are already. He plays a psychological game as much as business and power games.
Oh, yeah. I think he gets off on the psychological games. Like, that's his thing. Yeah. Speaking of bleh, I thought it was so gross when they get there and Arobynn says, and you smell divine too. I'm glad my gift was put to good use. And I was like, ugh, oh my God, that's so gross. But I will say, when Rowan reveals he used oil too, it was a very satisfying slap in the face. I was like, yes, fuck you, Arobynn. Fuck you.
That was a great moment.
Thank you, Rowan. And so unexpected. Like, it's such a small thing, but I was like, yeah.
Yes. I also found it interesting that during these initial conversations, Arobynn mentions, it's been an age since I saw one of the Fae. I don't remember them being so large. I would assume Arabynn's exposure to Fae was through Terrasen, but I wonder how much interaction he'd had with Fae, if any, in Wendelin, since I feel like most of the Fae in Terrasen were primarily demi-Fae as opposed to full Fae.
I don't know. I thought most of them were full Fae in Terrasen.
Are they?
I thought so, yeah. They just kind of kept to themselves in the Oakwald Forest is what I thought.
I thought a lot of them had been hunted, though, because of, I don't know. Maybe I'm not remembering things or we just don't get enough info, but I was just curious about Arabynn's overall exposure to them.
Yeah, it was an interesting comment. Also, I want to know, what is the deal? Are Aelin, Rowan, and Aelin all freakishly large? I swear there has been more mentions of that in this book than anything else. Like, Aelin's breaking the couch. Rowan's just a freakish mountain of a human. Lorcan is like Mount Everest. Everyone comments on how large they are. I just don't understand.
Actually, that's kind of funny because I keep seeing those graphics of charts comparing the different Fae
SJM men, yeah.
like SJM characters. And they put Lorcan at like 7 feet tall. And he truly actually looks like a giant. And then you go down the list, and I think Rowan's at like
6'3" or something.
Or 6'4". Right. And comparatively, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
Does he look like a midget horse?
He doesn't. Not small, but it
I
doesn't
know.
look that stunning compared to the way
Just 7 feet
they
tall.
describe him. But also, is Lorcan really 7 feet tall? That seems
Okay.
a little extreme.
I want some confirmation of that. I haven't seen anything like that in the text.
That's what I'm saying. But anyways, point being, in the way that everybody's described, it seems
they're all
like
giant.
They're abnormal. They're just like huge. I know. I will say Rowan is definitely growing on me steadily. As you all know, I really enjoyed that he had put on the oil in solidarity with Aelin and his comment. And then even more satisfying was the fact that it caught Arobynn so off guard because he didn't see that coming. Arobynn also then directs them to take the Valg down to the dungeon, and Aelin notes there was no other staff or assassins present. In the context of what happens later, it makes sense that Arobynn is extra cautious, considering everyone was already wary of him thanks to everything that Aelin had schemed up and created this like smear campaign against him, essentially.
Ooh, smear campaign. That's the perfect way to describe it. Yes, a smear campaign. A muckraker.
Despite the circumstances, I liked all the little mental conversations between Rowan and Aelin and how she finds comfort in Rowan's small shows of support. But of course, those were all ruined by Arobynn watching them make their exchanges because he's just a creepy turd. So, like every time you'd see one of those things going on, just knowing Arobynn was present, it just puts a sour little twist on everything that's going on because you're like, stop doing that or he's gonna notice, because he does, you know.
I hadn't thought about that. I'm like playing it out in my mind and seeing Rowan and Aelin just like, being in love. And then just Arobynn like in the corner, like creepy, like watching. And it's just, you're right.
The ire in his silver eyes.
The ire in his silver eyes. He's so dramatic.
We changed to Rowan's perspective, and he recalls how Aelin had been only a girl when the red-haired bastard had brought her here and taught her how to cut up men. There was no part of her that disgusted him, no part of her that scared him, but the thought of her in this place, this was where she'd last seen Sam, he realized, and her master knew it. I started thinking about, I made this comment, I think, in the previous episode, but just the reading order of Tab, because it's just top of mind with the reemergence of all the past characters. And if anything, I would say to read The Assassin and the Empire could be like a good refresher going into Queen of Shadows, maybe.
Yeah, that's a
like
good
maybe you don't
idea.
need to read the whole entire book, but if you just read that one thing, that would give you a good little refresher.
Yeah.
But you definitely feel all the pain and the anger and the mood and the tone of what's happening. And there's just all of that same emotion that you got while you were reading Tab hit you all over again when you are reminded of it in Queen of Shadows.
Yeah, now that you say it, I think maybe I would do Underworld and Empire because those are back-to-back sequentially. They're basically one big story broken into 2 parts almost. And it would be interesting, I think, for going into Queen of Shadows to like have the refresher of her interaction with Lysandra and Wesley.
Yes.
And knowing what you know now to read that and then be like, oh my God, Wesley. Honestly, Wesley kind of makes me just as sad as Sam because Wesley was Lysandra's Sam. You know what I mean? And he tried and he avenged Aelin. He killed Rorik Baron and Arobynn killed him. Justice for Wesley. Justice for Wesley. Well, we're going to get it shortly.
Very soon.
From Rowan's perspective, you can tell he is just on the verge of ending Arobynn right then and there. On a first read, I really didn't understand why Aelin went through the whole charade. I was just like, just kill him or have Aideen and Rowan do it. But on a second read, you see how things play out. And I think it's because it could impact how the assets get transferred in the will.
Right.
I'm assuming there's some clause that says the person who murdered you can't get your stuff. That's pretty common, like even in our society. Yeah, like I think
that's a will thing. I think that's just a general legal society.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, because otherwise everyone would just go around killing everybody for the shit in their will, you know? So I am assuming it's because she wanted plausible deniability and also to protect what's about to happen with the assets. But
Mhm.
I also think that at this point she was genuinely worried about getting the amulet. I keep forgetting in this entire book so far, the amulet is the most important thing. When she finally got it, I'm like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, that's a word key. But I got so caught up in everything else that was going on. I was like, oh yeah, we really need that in our possession. I also think there was a little part of her that just didn't want to have to go through with it. But after he puts the Vogue ring on her, he gives her no choice. And we'll talk about that more later because I think that sentiment is basically expressed by her.
Aside from that, this reminder of everything that's happened to Aelin and Sam because of Arobynn just makes his death so much more satisfying when it comes later. I also really love that Rowan is so in tune with Aelin, and increasingly so, it seems, based on that thread tug Aelin feels later. He thinks his self-control had to be in shreds tonight. He couldn't stop making excuses to touch her, but this touch was essential. After the change we see in Aelin, I just see how Rowan's change in being more touchy isn't related to the same thing that it is for Aelin. We just don't have an explanation for how it's possible, but my little theory was getting quite loud by the second read through here.
Oh, yeah? Mm.
Yeah, it was. We also get a quick recap of Sam's death through Aelin's thoughts and how she'd spent the night laying by his body in the dungeon room because she couldn't leave him. This part really got to me. It finally all hit me emotionally with Sam and just how awful everything was. I really think it's because of the continual reminder of how important he was to Aelin, and I finally hit my emotional exposure limit. My eyes were watering.
Aww.
Arobynn dismisses Rowan and Aelin, and the interrogation of the Stefan and Val infected host begins.
Oh my gosh, when I read that, immediately I was like, no, do not leave her alone with him. I can't believe they did it. I mean, obviously they have to, but I was like, this is a really bad idea.
I don't think they were that far, though, and
True.
I forget how sensitive their sense of hearing is. So they left, but they were still within earshot.
Probably.
For Faye, at least.
But it only takes a second, as we saw when he sliced her hand and put the ring on. I mean, literally less than a second.
Stefan tells Arobynn the following. The king uses the ring to control them, and it was on his left hand, which was a truth and a lie. The king also has a ring that he controls them all through, and once they put the rings on, they can't be removed. As far as we know, this is the truth and is consistent with what he told Aelin. The king also cuts their arm and licks their blood, and that blood link allows him to control them however he wants. This is a lie, and honestly, I'm a little surprised that Arobynn doesn't get suspicious because it directly conflicts with the ring statement. So, Stefan states that the Valg has been ordered to search for the general, but swears he won't say Aelin or Aelin are in the keep.
So basically, they played two truths and a lie, and Arobynn did not guess the lie.
No, because he's so greedy. He was so hungry for this information.
He is greedy. You're so right. That's a good word to describe him.
Having gotten enough info, Arobynn cuts off his left finger with the ring, and then finally kills him. He also lies to Aelin to state he'd keep the ring to study it, since the king was enslaving people to his will using it. This little snippet is, of course, foreshadowing for Arobynn's true intent. I think we had a discussion earlier about not trusting Arobynn in past episodes and being like, why does he want this dog so bad? And we're like, oh, he's probably going to try and use the ring because he wants to do what the king is doing. And sure enough, that's exactly what he was trying to do. So next, they head up to the dining room where once again, Arobynn strategically seats everyone to separate Aelin from Rowan and Aelin, while Lysandra plays her role as a vapid courtesan and rival to Aelin perfectly. The conversation turns to a discussion of Arobynn's betrayal of Aelin that got her sent to Endovier, though he continues to deny and lie about the extent of his involvement, asking Lysandra to back up all of his bullshit. I want to commend Lysandra because to this day, I'm just so surprised that Arobynn never found out about her helping and allying with Aelin, but I do think that overall this speaks to how A, good Lysandra is at playing roles and playing the game, and B, how irrelevant Lysandra ultimately was to Arobynn. He never had a true interest in her. He only cared about how he could use her to get to Aelin, and therefore it kind of made her his blind spot.
Ooh, damn. I didn't think about that. You're right, though. But she really was irrelevant to him. She was basically there for sex and to get back at Aelin. Damn. Yep. That's despicable. And damn, I just can't stop saying, damn, you're so right. Ugh. He also makes it subtly known that he is aware of Chaol's presence on guard duty, which just reinforces how insanely lucky they were that Arobynn never figured out Lysandra's secrets and what she was up to. I mean, as you said, it's just a miracle. And actually, I should have probably thought about that a little bit more about the reasons why, but I think your reasons were chef's kiss.
Arobynn takes an opportunity to try and throw Aelin off with a reminder of how he'd intentionally left a hole in the wall from when Aelin had thrown a dagger at Lysandra's head. But Aelin didn't pick up on it because her and Rowan were having yet another mental conversation. Their conversation was quite flirty as Aelin scandalously reveals she wasn't wearing undergarments under her dress, which really throws Rowan off.
I mean, honestly, though, this was kind of jarring to me. It starts out with what a hellion Aelin was at 17, and then somehow it turned to she wasn't wearing underwear. I mean, I'm not mad at it, but it just like is almost a little bit of a juvenile conversation. Like, I feel like those were the kind of like, oh, I'm not wearing any underwear. You know, like you did that when you were like a teenager. I don't know. This conversation was also just so funny to me because they're in probably one of the most dangerous places they could be with one of the most dangerous people in the world. And they're over there flirting and sexting, or I don't know. What do you call it when it's mind to mind speak instead of on a phone?
I don't know. I'll have to think on that.
Smexting? Sminding? I don't know. Sminding. But that's basically what they were doing. I was like, this is not the time, guys. Like, read the room.
I know, because it throws them off, and then they don't catch Arobynn watching them. Unfortunately, the combo was distracting enough that Aelin misses a question from Arobynn, leading to silence around the table.
This scene is actually important because, as it's noted later, this makes Arobynn absolutely crazy jealous, and it's what makes Arobynn decide he wants to kill Rowan. Basically, it's just a repeat of the same situation. And Aelin realizes that Arobynn asked her a question that she didn't hear, and it's described, there was only the calculating ire in his silver eyes, which might have once made her start begging for mercy. This is just obviously a clear indication that he's furious, and what Lysandra alludes to later, where she's like, she'd seen it in Arobynn's eyes, right? It's just such an interesting scene because you're thinking like Aelin and Rowan are sminding. Okay. Aedian's just there. He's just like following them around. Arobynn's staring at Aelin with ire in his eyes. Lysandra's watching Rowan and Aelin and Arobynn, and man, what a cool scene to play out in your head. After that, when he repeats his question, I've asked you if you've had fun these past few weeks wrecking my investment properties, ensuring that all of my clients won't touch me. And at this point, I was like, huh? The only thing that we knew of, at least that I guess was caught up on, was the vaults that she destroyed. So I had no idea what he was talking about. And so I was so psyched to find out like how it all came together.
Yeah. We got the big reveal of the true intent of what Aelin was doing. Because on the surface, as readers, the only thing we knew about why she destroyed the vaults was because that was part of her retribution for Sam. But we didn't realize that the secondary underlying thing was that she was baiting him into making a financial decision that would benefit her later. So I was like, whoa, how many layers?
I was thinking about this too. I'm like, why did we not question and interrogate it more when she specifically led the King's Guard to the vaults? I mean, I guess we thought it was still, she intended to do that. It was just for Sam. Okay, never mind. Scratch my question.
Yeah. And I don't remember if at that point, well, no, because after the meeting with Arobynn, that's when we learned that he wanted the Vowed Commanders. And so if I remember correctly, I just assumed that she was just fucking with him basically by sending the kings there. Maybe it was just meant to be an intimidating tactic on her end. That's just what I thought. And I never questioned anything else.
Those were the thoughts we thunked, and we're just going to keep on thinking them until we hear otherwise.
So that ends chapter 42. Moving on to chapter 43. Turns out that Arobynn had indeed figured out Aelin was responsible for much of the damage, and we get the true extent of Aelin's plotting with assistance from Lysandra. We learn via Arobynn that the red hair Aelin was sporting was actually to make herself look like a man named Hinsel Cormac, a loyal client and investor of Arobynn's.
When I read this, I was so delighted. Just the sheer cleverness of it. But also, I remember us very specifically having a conversation about this. And I was like, nah, I'm sure it was some kind of mistake. And she just played along and stayed in character. And I was like,
I remember that too. He'd figured it out when someone had called Cormac's name at Dorian's party / Adian's rescue, and Cormac had waved back at him. The person had also disclosed to the king that he saw this Cormac look-alike heading straight for Aelin before the explosion happened, and that carriages belonging to a business owned by Cormac and Arobynn had gone missing, and coincidentally, Arobynn's other clients were then told those carriages had been the getaway vehicles for Aelin as orchestrated by Arobynn because he was now a rebel sympathizer, or so the story goes. And I was like, holy shit. But yeah, it turns out that random call out at the party was significant because she was playing somebody and it was all part of this plot. And wow, crazy.
All of this has taught me to not overlook stuff like that anymore. Like when something like that happens and you're like, what do you think, Addison? I'm never going to be like, nah, it probably wasn't important. I'll be like, I don't know what it was, but it was fucking important. So just remember it, okay? I have learned my lesson.
Never dismiss my crazy theories.
Never.
My sixth sense for something weird.
Also, don't get me wrong, Aelin is amazing, but fucking mad props to Lysander for helping feed this information and orchestrate all of this, because Aelin could not have done all this without her. I mean, she just wouldn't have had the knowledge to do it.
Not.
It does make me happy because Lysander was basically trapped with Arobynn from the time Aelin went to Endovir until now. But it makes me feel like all that time that she had to spend with Arobynn was worth something because it all helped her gather the information she needed for her revenge. And so I'm like,
yes,
at least there was that benefit to it, that it all came together at the end.
Thoroughly annoyed, Arobynn asks Aelin, what will it take, dearest, for you to stop being such a raging pain in my ass? And the fake negotiations between them begins.
Her thought here also answers a question we've asked a few times. Why play Arobynn's games? She thinks there they were, the words she wanted to hear, the reason she'd been so careful not to wreck him altogether, but merely to annoy him just enough. Obviously, a big part was to make sure she could get the amulet of Orinth, but it was also so she could find out his true intentions. And so I was happy that we finally get some closure on that, because all this time I'm like, girl, just kill him. Why go through all of this charade? And now we see there are a multitude of reasons why, all to benefit her and Terrasen.
Having moved to the sitting room, Aelin gets down to business, stating, it doesn't erase the fact that you knew very well who I was when you found me. You took my family necklace off me and told me that anyone who came looking for me would wind up killed by my enemies. You wanted to shape me into your own weapon. Why?
I thought it was very clever of her here to work the necklace into the conversation, because in reality, that's a completely unnecessary part of the statement. And so I think she wanted to bring it up in a way that wasn't super obvious to sort of introduce it into the conversation.
Mm-hmm. According to Arobynn, he thought he could give Aelin the tools she needed to survive and defeat the king one day, but being the self-important shit he is, he adds, who would you have become without me? Some pampered, quaking princess. I gave you the ability to bring down men like Adie and Asher with a few blows, and all I get for it is contempt. Oh, man, this made me so mad to read. It's true that he trained Aelin to become as lethal as she is, for a human at least, but the way he did all of this was so horrific that, as we've seen, none of this was really ever about protecting Aelin. It was protecting and then using her as an asset, not a person. And I think there's obviously a huge difference between those two things. So,
oh yeah. In this conversation, Aelin also thinks lies and truth as he's always taught her. And I think you have to evaluate this whole conversation happening between them with that in mind. I think Arobynn is telling her the truth here. He did train her and make her strong and lethal and capable of taking down even the King of Otterland, perhaps, but he's lying that he did it for her. It was also to benefit himself. I think your language about she was an asset and he protects his assets and investments is really like hitting the nail on the head there. That's really what it was all about for him. I read this conversation a couple times, and after each sentence, I was like, okay, truth or lie, truth or lie. because it's all just like embedded together. That's what makes Arobynn so clever. That's what makes him so interesting to read and so hot. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'll retract those words immediately.
Retracted. He's too creepy now. He's gotten too creepy to be kind of like, ooh, he's like,
it's
ooh.
just, it's too sinister and too manipulative to be interpreted otherwise. But Addison is redacting that last part.
Redacting,
guys.
I am. Strong redaction.
Aelin assures him the debt for what he'd done was nowhere near paid, but ultimately demands he could start proving you've bended your ways by giving me back my family's amulet. Then you can prove it some more by giving me your resources. Arobynn's responsive in what capacity confirms he did have the amulet as she had speculated with her bank trips, but this was also foreshadowing for what she was actually doing with all of those trips to the bank. She wanted the resources, his resources. Despite Arobynn's counter threats about tipping off her apartment location to the king, Aelin had cleverly accounted for it all by making their lack of return from this meeting to serve as the signal for Chaol to send his message to the king instead. Ultimately, Arobynn gives up the amulet, which he had been wearing the whole damn time. I'm assuming he actually probably put it on just for this meeting. Or do you actually think he's just been always wearing the amulet?
No, because she would have, at some point in the years they spent together, recognized it.
Right, okay.
It would have been too risky for him to have it out often because it could have triggered something for her seeing it.
Right.
And he told her that it had been lost in the river. That's a memory she has. And she realizes that he took it off of her because she wouldn't have survived in the river without it. And that's how she pieces together he has it. So, no, I think he probably put it on for this meeting.
That also does, just as a side thought, bring up questions of like how the amulet's power works. Because if he wasn't wearing it all the time, I don't know. I just have questions about how far out. Do you have to be in direct contact with it, or does it just have to be in the vicinity? Probably not answers we're going to get super soon.
Yeah, we'll talk about it more too when her and Rowan are actually playing with the amulet.
Yeah. The amulet was exactly she'd remembered, with the cerulean blue front with the ivory stag and the golden star between its antlers. The immortal stag of Mala Firebringer brought over to these lands by Brandon himself to set free in the Oakwald Forest. And then most importantly, of course, this was the third and final word key. Aelin speculates that perhaps Arobynn's possession of it all these years had led to his rise as unrivaled king of the Assassin's Guild, and perhaps his power and influence derived solely from the necklace.
I was really intrigued by this idea that Arobynn's possession of the amulet is what has kept him alive and well, and has been part of why he's been so successful. Obviously, he's dead now, so we'll never know how he would do without it. But it did make me wonder if the possession of that is what gave him and allotted him the success that he had achieved.
As soon as Aelin grabs the word key, she immediately feels her blood sing, not right, not right, not right. And she goes on to wonder if you needed magic in your veins to feel its power, and that perhaps it had never called to Arobynn as it did to her now. So this thought confirms a few things. The feeling it produces matches much of the similar feelings that have been described in association with the Valg before. All of Manon's thoughts about things at the Omega and in Morath feeling otherworldly and wrong kind of align with what Aelin is feeling from this amulet right now. B, her suggestion that needing magic in the blood as a prerequisite to feeling its power confirms that Arobynn is not magical, something that I had wondered about. And then C, the fact that he actually gives it to her definitely signifies he had no idea what it actually is. Instead, he's playing with those damn rings, thinking he struck gold when he's had quite literally the real power in his possession this whole damn time.
God, I didn't even think about it like that. Like, he thought he won because he had that fake ball ring and he had a fucking word key. He had a word key, one of the 3 most powerful objects in the entire world. And he had no idea. Like, when you say it like that, you're like, wow.
He really fumbled on that
He
one.
really fumbled.
The power of the amulet continues spreading through Aelin's blood like ink in the water. She manages to keep herself under control as she heads toward the door and wraps up the conversation with Arobynn.
I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of how the word keys call to people or affect people with or without magic in their blood, But of course, I would like answers to those questions. But more specifically, I would love to know what it was like for the King of Otterlin when he first came into contact with one of the word keys. We've talked about, like, does he have magic? Is it dormant? How much? And all that. And so I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. But it did make me wonder, just seeing Aelin's very visceral reaction to it, how the king would respond.
Before she leaves, Arobynn interrupts to say one more thing as he steps closer and then slips the wordstone ring onto her finger. I gasped when this happened. I for sure thought that she was toast after that. And then, thank God, this was exactly what she planned, though, because I was stressing.
Well, I got confused because then I'm like, wait, did she take out a dagger and like gut him? It just happened so quickly. I'm like, whoa, what? Well, he did what now? As my 3-year-old says when she gets excited, she goes, OMG, why? And that was my exact reaction. I was like, OMG, why, baby? I don't know where she got the why from. She just like added that herself, but now she says it. I don't know. It's cute. So
it's stuck. Yeah.
It's stuck. And OMG, why? Because, wow.
And that now concludes chapter 43. Moving on to chapter 44.
So I have an overarching thought for this chapter. Many, many times in this series so far, there was a description of Aelin and Arobynn's relationship that went like this. Father, brother, lover. He'd never really declared himself any of them. That always stood out to me because it's such a distinct way to describe a relationship between two people. I don't think there are many relationships where it's murky in that way. But for Arobynn, It makes perfect sense. And to be honest, I always wondered what it was Arobynn wanted from her. And to be honest, I'm not sure he knew until enough time passed and things developed the way they did. But this chapter definitely confirms it was lover. That's what he wanted. So? I mean, it's pretty heavily implied that he wanted to have sex with her. Like, he wanted her under his control for sexual purposes as well as to take over Terrasen and all that.
See, I still kind of feel like that was a part of it, but I think the bigger thing for him was always about how he could use Aelin, Queen of Terrasen, to his advantage and take advantage of the influence and the power that she had for his own purposes. The physical love part in whatever Arobynn's convoluted way of all of that is, I think it was mixed in there for sure. In my opinion, I don't feel like that was his primary goal with her.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think it was his primary goal either. I just mean, like, between father, brother, and lover, he declared himself as the lover between those three. No, I agree. His primary goal was not sex with her. He definitely wanted power and all that shit. But of the positional relationship to her, he chose the lover route.
I feel like Master lover, is more,
yes.
Master is probably the most accurate. It's not father, brother, or lover. It's fucking Master.
Fair.
Aelin deserves an Emmy for her performance because, again, I was totally sold on everything that they were doing.
You were locked in.
I was locked in. I believed everything. Arobynn raises her hand to taste her blood from a cut he'd given her, and believing she'd become enslaved to her, he tests out some commands. Most insidious and disgusting of all was his command for her to tell him she loved him, and him feeling her up after shooing her out with some orders to keep quiet about the ring. Barf? I'm bringing back Get Flushed for Arobynn because he is the ultimate turd.
You know, it wasn't just that he wanted her to tell him that she loved him. It was when he made her say his name. That was just what really gave me the ick. Like, something about that was just, ugh, like, it was just so gross.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, SJM got me good as we all waited in agony for the trio to get back to the apartment and out of Arobynn's prying eyes and ears. But once inside, Aelin pulls off the ring, stating, so that was what he wanted. I honestly expected something grander, while Aelin and I picked up our jaws off the floor.
Lorraine, you got.
I totally did. I 100% did. Rowan is surprised that Arobynn didn't check Stefan's other hand, while Aelin demands an explanation immediately. The pulling feeling of the word key continues, and it's interesting that Aelin feels thunder rumble deep in the abyss of power before explaining to Aelin how they'd come up with their plan. I point out the thunder thing because she feels that rumble again later, and then the third rumble actually manifests or coincides with real thunder outside for a storm. I don't know what all that means, but it's definitely related to something about the power of the word key.
You know, something I just thought about when we did our cover analysis of Queen of Shadows, we talked about how there was like a blood red sky. And we're like, oh, that's never good. And I wonder if there is something to that. You know, when there's like a really powerful object, like a common fantasy trope, there's like a green, purple, dark cloud, thunderstorm thing. I wonder if that's like a little foreshadowing or, I don't know, descriptive language of something like that. It makes sense. I also think it's interesting because it would seem Arobynn never felt that kind of pull, because if he did, I'm assuming he would have investigated the amulet more thoroughly. And it also seems like Aelin isn't feeling any kind of draw or power from it being like in her presence either. I know we're going to mention this many times, but it does call a lot into question about, I guess, the amulet and how it reacts to different people and all that.
And proximity, too. Because Aelin does have some magic in his blood.
He does,
so you would assume
I mean, Gavriel was his freaking father.
Right. But Aelin also goes to great lengths to keep it away from him currently. Like, she hasn't told him what it is yet. And she hasn't really let him get near it. So
it's telling that neither Aelin or Rowan want to pick it up. So you're probably right about the proximity.
Aelin fills Aelin in on how they'd found a commander with a weaker link to the Valg, and from there they were able to appeal to the man left inside to lie to Arobynn about how the control works in exchange for the mercy of death for him. She'd cleverly had Lysandra help them craft a fake ring.
God, so clever, so freaking clever. I like that she gives a nod to Aelin on the idea. If you'll recall back, when the king first gave Aelin a wordstone ring, he threw it in the ocean and had a fake one made. And that's something that's revealed at the beginning of Heir of Fire. I was like, yeah, that's so clever.
Aelin is, of course, rightly shocked, but asks why go through all this planning. And Aelin states she needed to know that there was no redeeming him, referring to Arobynn. It was his final test to show his hand. We've had many lengthy discussions about this relationship, and it's heartbreaking to know that even after everything, Aelin still had a small bit of hope that there was just a teensy tiny little bit of good still left in Arobynn, if only for her. And that's all just a testament to how psychologically manipulative and convoluted the nature of the relationship was. In the end, though, if it looks and smells like a turd, it's probably still a turd.
Overall, I have the same thought. I feel like the sentiment is really highlighted in the last lines where she thinks, so now we know, some small pathetic part of her wished she didn't. I think that despite everything Arobynn has done, a small part of her wanted him to be a good person that was worth saving. And I think this is for two main reasons. The first is, as Lorraine said, it's partially because of the psychological manipulation she's experienced by him for basically her whole life. But the second is, I think it's also because Aelin's own journey has been one of forgiveness and redemption. And I think she was hopeful that she could extend that to Arobynn and that he could be redeemed too. Yeah. Because that's been pretty core to her life, and especially in the last few months. I think some small part of her hoped that she could extend that same grace to him that other people did for her. And, you know, obviously Arobynn shattered that. So...
Once in Aelin's room, Aelin and Rowan discuss what to do with the amulet. Rowan confirms that he, too, could feel whatever it is inside that thing, and Aelin goes on to say that in the past, people must have assumed that the feeling came from the magic of whoever was wearing it, but she realizes that this wasn't the case, and instead, a royal wearing it was just a way to cover its power in plain sight without hurting the wearer, since her father and uncle had little to no magic. They flip over the amulet where there are 3 word marks carved into the back. Rowan immediately recognizes one of them as the same one that had glowed on Aelin's forehead and Gwendolen while she fought Narok's Valg in Hoth, and that we, as readers know, had also glowed on her forehead during her duel with Cain back in TOG. Aelin identifies it as Brandon's mark, the mark of the bastard born, the nameless, but the other 2 word marks remain unrecognized.
I'm going to take us all the way back to Calm. I'm still not over Baba's whole nameless is my price thing.
Yep, absolutely.
This to me is just another breadcrumb that the word mark on Aelin's head and the whole nameless thing is still important and is going to come up, because I'm sorry, that's
Mhm.
not a coincidence. It's on Brannon, it's on Aelin, and it's on a word key, okay? I just want to bring that back up again because we haven't talked about it in a while, and I'm not happy that we don't know what it's about.
I think it has something to do with something going on with the gods. You know how Mom was on God Watch, but like,
Not this again.
I think something happened with the gods as like former deities of some sort way back when. We don't know where they've gone or what happened to them since then. Now they're just figures that the people and the Fae and whoever like look up to and respect. But I really feel like it has something to do with Mala and what she probably did somewhere back in the day, thousands of years ago.
You really think so?
I think so, because Mala was the one who integrated her fire magic with Brannon, bestowed Brannon with gifts and whatnot too. So I think it traces back to Mala originally. I'm kind of feeling like it's not Brannon per se, but it was Mala, and then Mala to Brannon, and then Brannon to the rest of his lineage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong, but
We're always wrong. That's the thing. We're always probably wrong.
anyways, Aelin also figures any info her family may have known had likely been stored in the Library of Orinth, which of course had been destroyed by the King of Otterlin, though they wouldn't know for sure until they are able to return to Terrasen. And I have a question. Do you think this will come back up? I'm like 50-50 on whether they'd actually find anything left in the library unless there was some kind of secret hidden area or specially protected lockbox that escaped the king's destruction.
When you say come back up, do you mean the Library of Orinth, the word marks in the back of the amulet, or the first accounts of past monarchs?
The first accounts, like finding information about what these word marks actually mean.
That's a good question. I mean, my gut says yes. I don't know if you remember this way back in, I think it might have even been TOG or COM. I said something along the lines of, I feel that the Library of Orinth or other major libraries will come up because in those first two books, Aelin talks all the time about knowledge and how that was the real power and books and all of that. And so do you think if we ever make it to Terrasen, that the Library of Orinth will come up again? Now, for the accounts of the past monarchs, ironically, I could see it coming up in relation to something else. Like they're looking for information about the word marks and they discover something else that's super important and changes the course of their path and whatever, or it's like information they need to help achieve their goal. But specifically for the word marks, I don't know. You know, it would be great if they could just go to Panjali and ask Nehemia's parents, since they know all about word marks.
Oh, yeah.
That would be great.
True that. Maybe she will go there.
You know, this is not really the best place to put this, but since we're kind of on this path, when you think about it, the entire series has taken place in friggin' Mistward and Rifthold. We ain't gone anywhere else. The entire series. And I would love to leave Rifthold.
At least for Aelin's discovery of what's going on. We've gotten a little bit in other parts with the witches and like their side of things.
Oh, that's true.
But as far as Aelin's discovery of plot-related things, she has only been
stuck in
Rifthold. Two places. I know.
Just small town girl.
Small town girl living in
a lonely world. That song fits, actually.
a little bit. Anyways, okay. After some bickering over who should stash the amulet under her floorboard, Aelin picks it up, but this time she doesn't feel the same wrong pull she did before. Instead, she describes the feeling of whatever magic was in there as slumbering.
I thought it was really interesting that before she picks it up, it says she bent down, willing her mind blank while she lifted the amulet off the table. I think that this is because the word keys are inherently neutral, which is something Aelin confirms later, and they sway whatever way the holder of the key is leaning towards. So even moving it, she wanted to remain as neutral as possible, because if she was having dark thoughts, it may affect things negatively, or if she was having positive thoughts, it may affect things in a positive way. And in a way that hypothetically could be even more dangerous because it could draw her to wanting to use the word keys power and to justify her use of it because, well, I want to use it for good. And isn't that how all great evils start? They find this powerful object. They're going to be the exception and use it for good, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so I think it becomes a very slippery slope. So even in this moment, she wants to be as neutral as possible so it doesn't pick up on her wants, needs, desires, etc.
Simultaneously, as she stashed the amulet, she feels a thread tug inside her. Not a thread, but a wind, as if some force barreled from Rowan into her, as if their bond were a living thing, and she could feel what it was to be him. And I was like, ah! You can't tell me that that's not related to something other than being Karenov. I mean, whatever, maybe it is, but especially considering the behavior of both of them during the meeting with Arobynn, and then the next scene on the rooftop, and just their inner thoughts and their pull that they have towards each other. I don't know. I'm adding this to my little evidence log, okay? I'm just waiting for the reveal at this point.
No. No.
Yes.
I think it's exactly because they're Karenon that she felt that. She has literally tapped into his power before, and that's essentially what just happened now. I'm sorry. You still have not answered the question. How can he have another mate? Okay, mates are incredibly rare. So he got not one, but two in the same lifetime. He already had a mate. You can't have two. You don't get two.
Yeah, but like, think about the sequence of this, okay? We already know feelings have been built. Then very suddenly, after a very stressful circumstance, kind of dangerous and risky, she feels this thread tug now. And then after this, in the next scene, she decides to make like more romantic moves. I don't know, just the way that everything is laid out.
Well, you could be romantically involved without being mates. Basically, most of the Fae are, because they don't have mates.
The thread tug thing.
They're Karenon. That's probably just as fair as a mating bond. You know what? You're not going to ruin my new year, okay? Don't start my new year off on a wrong foot.
I will, and I am.
I know you
I'm gonna
will.
let this go. Okay. Also, it's mentioned that Aelin doesn't tell Aelin about the amulet actually being a key, and we brought this up a little bit beforehand, but I do want to know why that is. Is it just precautionary because the less people know about it, the better?
I don't know. I found that's a little odd, to be honest. I get you don't want to be blabbing to everyone, but when Aelin finds out about this, he's going to feel super betrayed that she didn't trust him enough to tell him. Okay. You can only use the excuse of the less people knew, the better so many times before you're like, okay, but you just don't trust me or whatever it is. So I'm assuming that's going to be her justification. And I mean, it is a word key, right? It is literally one of the most powerful objects. But at the same time, I'm just like, you probably should have told him.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, and you should tell someone else too in case something happens to her and Rowan. In case they're captured or killed. More than 3 is a little much, but I feel like 3 people should know, at least.
She tells Rowan she had felt the essence of wearing his skin for a moment, and interestingly, Rowan doesn't seem very pleased about this, though he states that sort of ability could be a helpful tool for later. So between this and his reaction on the roof later, I kind of feel like Rowan knows something about what that feeling Aelin has is, but he isn't ready to disclose what it means yet, because I think he is also very shocked too. So, I don't know. Doing a lot of speculating here, okay, guys? Aelin redirects back to the amulet to say, I think these things might be neutral by nature. It's the bearer who guides how they are used. In the hands of someone pure of heart, it would only be beneficial. That was how Terrasen thrived. The keys can corrupt an already black heart or amplify a pure one. I've never heard anything about hearts that are somewhere in between. This does confirm most of what we had learned from Elena back in DOG about word marks. I think there's still a lot more that I want to learn about the word marks, but since those and word keys are both related to the word, it goes along with the general idea that the word and its forces are all morally neutral and only amplify the nature of whatever something already is.
I think we can safely say that's confirmed now in relation to the power of the word. I also thought it was interesting. Rowan snorts and says, trust me, your ancestors weren't utterly holy. And I don't know why, but my gut is screaming at me that this is foreshadowing for some important information that is going to come up later. Maybe perhaps in some of the first accounts of kings or in the Great Library of Orinth. There's a lot of different directions you could go with this, so I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole just yet. But I'm thinking you could trace that event to Brannon, like maybe he wasn't a saint. I don't think any of them are evil or anything like that, but maybe they weren't the picture of sainted rulers that everyone thought they were, and specifically that Aelin thinks they were. And one of them did something maybe with good intentions, but is going to affect the future. This conversation feels too heavy-handed to ignore. Aelin's like, right, Terrasen were all pure of heart. And Rowan's like, no, they weren't. It just feels like that will come up again in some context.
I get that sense as well. I also appreciate that Rowan ensures Aelin the fact that she worries says enough about her intentions. I think at the end of the day, much of what Aelin had previously believed about herself was the result of what other bad people like Arobynn had made her think was true. But just as the witches are learning that they are made to become what they are now and not naturally like that, I think Aelin is the same. Aelin has, of course, done bad things and has been forced to do bad things, but as we've discussed as early as TOG, we've seen that she's always had boundaries and morals to what she was often forced to do because of her circumstances. The fact that she's even considering and is aware that she's not always pure of heart and has gray to a lot of her decisions signifies that she's not as bad as she is kind of making herself out to be. I also thought that Rowan's words when he says, if you appear to be heading toward the Dark Lordom, I promise to bring you back to the light. It could be some foreshadowing for a very real situation with some Dark Lord or some Dark Force, perhaps in the future. And Rowan is going to serve as an anchor point for her and help her kind of like come out of that, if that makes sense.
Do you mean that you think Aelin will start turning dark or start struggling and that's a challenge she'll face?
No, I think like quite literally they're gonna, well, I mean, we've been working towards something like really dark, like with the Valgan stuff, but I feel like there's gonna be a big battle moment with the big bad, and Rowan is going to be there to help her come back out of it.
Okay,
or to like make it through that.
Okay, because his comment is like joking, right? If you start turning into like an evil person. And so I was like, wait, do you think she's going to turn evil now? I mean, she does have a word key. And I feel like that can be a very enticing and dangerous power to have in your possession.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So obviously there were a ton of details in this set of chapters, but another thing I thought was noteworthy is how the clock on her nightstand chimed just as real thunder booms outside again. There's a lot of connections that can be drawn from this. The clock chiming and the clock tower in the glass castle. Plus, actually, now that I think about it, the clock chiming thing has been a thing since Crown of Midnight. And this association between the thunder feeling she gets from the word key and the thunder booming outside for real. I kind of wonder if maybe the word key itself is going to be needed to destroy the clock tower. Maybe it becomes a part of how she ultimately takes it down. I don't know.
Ooh, that's a good call out, an interesting association. I mean, if you think about it, the clock ticking chiming has come up since Tab, because remember when she's waiting for Sam, there's like a big metaphor there too. Or like when she's running to save Nehemia, there's the clock chime, the ticking. You're right. There's an allusion to that, the clock and sort of danger, impending danger. So it's a really good link.
As far as jewelry goes, Lysandra's jeweler got a lot of business out of Aelin recently because we see that she also had a replica of the amulet made in case anyone asked where it went. I thought that was also smart since now that she has the key, she needs to make sure she keeps it permanently, and what better way to throw people off than with a replica. Later that night, Aelin takes watch on the roof, and Rowan gets fed up with waiting for her to come back down. When he gets to the roof, it's noted that Aelin was facing westward, not toward the glowing castle, but across the city. We learn later that this was foreshadowing for part of her plan with Arobynn, giving herself an alibi during Arobynn's time frame of death.
She really thought of everything. You know, you have to be really intelligent to be able to think through something like that. And think through all the implication and how everyone else will react, right? She had to think about, okay, if I do this, then Harding and Mullen will think that I did this. So how can I counteract that? I mean, she really played like 78 moves ahead. And that is super, super impressive.
It turns out that Rowan wasn't off put by Aelin being able to feel his essence. Instead, he wanted to tell her that he didn't care about what she knew about him so long as it didn't scare her away.
I thought it was funny that he had no problem telling her this and being emotionally vulnerable. But the reason he did it is because he was too distracted by how hot she looked. I'm like, dude, you're God, men. I'm sorry, men. You're idiots. Also, this is the worst way I've ever seen someone described. When he sees her on the roof, it says, the rain had left streaks of coal down her face and her skin was as pale as a fish's belly. And I was like, if someone ever describes me in that way, I will end them. Okay, that is not a nice way to describe someone. I was like, really, Rowan? Wow, that just screams romance. I should have known then that this interaction was not going to go the way that I thought it was going to.
Oh my
you know
God,
what
I
I'm
got
saying?
my hopes up so far and then massive disappointment. So rather than start with that, because boys are dumb, the convo starts with the plans for Arobyn's death, and Aelin reveals she told Lysandra she could do it because more than me, more than you or Adian, Lysandra deserves to be the one who ends him.
Okay. In this conversation, everyone is offering to help kill Arobynn. Everyone wants to do it. And even Kale is willing to be there to make sure everything goes fine. So here is my question to you. No thinking, just gut reaction. In a 101 combat, a fair fight, no trickery, with weapons, who would win? Arobynn versus Lysandra.
Arobynn.
Arobynn versus Kale.
Arobynn.
Arobynn versus Aelin.
Aelin.
Arobynn versus Adian.
Okay, this one's like a real middle one. I think Aelin can be Adian, so I'm kind of inclined to believe Arobynn could be Adian.
It's close. It's so really close, right?
That could go either way.
Okay. And Arobynn versus Rowan.
Rowan.
I know. I feel like Rowan would have like grabbed his head and crushed his skull. He just would have been like, you know what I mean? Yeah, like not even like a conversation. Like a melon. Like a melon.
A hippo eating a melon.
Literally.
You seen how, like hippos eat watermelons and just like crush them.
It's crazy. Okay. Especially when you think about how hard a watermelon is and they're just with their jaws, they're just like, and you're like, okay, yep. Wow. Yep. I think I agree with all of yours. I think Kale would put up a good fight, but he'd get got. I actually think Aelin and Adian, either or versus Arobynn, it would be close. Because you have to remember, Arobynn trained Aelin. And then you've got the emotional element. I think ultimately Aelin would prevail. Poor Lysandra. She's the only one who's as dead as a dormouse. She ain't got no chance.
Well, being stuck in this human form for sure. I think she would have a chance like with magic, but obviously that. Yeah. And the only reason I said Aelin probably could now is because at this point in the series, she's also been trained by Rowan. She has way more experience. So she's had very training methods that would probably throw Arobynn off. Arobynn doesn't know her that well anymore. But I think in the past, I could see a situation where it could have been a pretty even scenario. So Rowan takes careful note of all of Aelin's emotions and how she looked, but Aelin shares that despite Arobynn being truly despicable, she still felt guilty because she owed him her life. She thinks, all this time I thought it would be a relief, a joy to end him, but all I feel is hollow and tired. As we've discussed many times, the relationship between Aelin and Arobynn was definitely inappropriate, but it was also very complex. Arobynn did save her life and ensure her survival as she grew up, even if it all came with strings attached. And I would imagine that's a very difficult situation to navigate and process. Plus, at the end of the day, most normal, decent beings do not want to murder other beings, no matter how awful they are. I think given a choice, at least you would hope that it's not just an easy, flippant decision to just kill someone. So
I completely agree. I'm actually not surprised by her feeling this way at all. It really tracks with just her whole journey and her relationship with Arobynn and how everything played out.
All of this restraint of Rowan's is really, honestly, just getting on my nerves because just give her the damn hug without being like, just this once, he would let himself hold her. I was like, no, hugs all the time.
No hugs, just kiss. More kiss! Yeah.
Aside from that, Aelin asked Rowan to hunt down Lorcan and see if he'd managed to kill the other word hounds, so she would leave the decision of whether to eliminate him up to Rowan out of respect for their history. This is also another difficult situation because even if Rowan and Lorcan don't get along personally, they've fought many battles and completed many missions together on behalf of Maeve. And working together in any capacity fosters a level of familiarity that definitely makes a decision like this much more complicated.
Yeah, I don't know why, but my gut says he doesn't want to kill Lorcan. Whether it's because deep down he likes them or feels this kindred spirit because they were both part of Maeve's blood oath or their shared history. I don't know, but I feel like he doesn't want to, deep down.
Yeah, I could see that. I also really love the next sequence of events, where after Aelin asks Rowan to burn the black dress and sell the bat wing cones, she hugs him tighter. Once again, he smells her jasmine, lemon verbena, and crackling ember scent as he stood with his queen in the rain, breathing in her scent and let her steal his warmth for as long as she needed. I know keeping distance between them is like the smart thing to do or whatever, since Aelin's a queen, but at this point, it's just so obvious that there are feelings, and it's annoying that we go from this sweet moment to then Rowan freaking out and running away. I was like,
oh my God. I know. I'm like 300 years old and you still have commitment issues. Surprise, surprise.
And this, of course, brings us to a perspective change to Aelin as she thinks about how Arobynn was likely dead by now. And with that, the clicking of a lock finally opened. I like the lock metaphor as a representation of Aelin finally being free of a man who had quite literally gotten her locked up in shackles, among other things, but also how it symbolizes the final, I guess, like release of Celaena Sardathian and the emergence of the true Aelin and a new course for her life.
Oh, yeah. Very nice.
Aelin goes on to look at Rowan and tease him about unsettling him with more undergarments comments. And I was like, yes, this is the moment. You're finally going to kiss. With the line, seeing that dungeon room tonight, she realized she was tired of death and of waiting and of saying goodbye. We were just totally set up to think that something was going to happen. And then it was cruelly yanked from us.
Cruelly.
And I was very upset.
Ditto.
Just as an aside, though, I especially felt like that was a touching thought from her, and also sad because obviously Aelin had taken it slow with Sam and then ultimately missed the opportunity because he was killed.
Aww.
But to get back on track, I was very excited because then she also cups his face and she goes on to say friends, but more, so much more. And she known it longer than she wanted to admit. And I was like, there it is. They do have romantic feelings. And she also thinks she was a fool to have dodged it and denied it.
I know. I'd really love to know when it changed for her. Obviously sometime in Heir of Fire, but what was the moment? I'm wondering if it was like after they face that horrible creature in Heir of Fire and they get back with Luca and everything. I should go back and read Heir of Fire and see if I can like pinpoint the moment where it shifted.
I think it was after Beltane and after she burned out and then Rowan had left and then she thought he had abandoned her too, but then he actually came back. And that's when, you know, he brought her and started like taking care of her.
That's true.
Way. So I don't know. I don't think they necessarily knew that was going on, but I think that was the shift. So
that's fair.
Anyways, it was not, in fact, time to kiss. It was time for heartbreak. Because Rowan throws her hands away from his face, steps away, and then says, don't do that. Don't touch me like that. And I was like, excuse me? And then he walks away after Aelin apologizes. She's, of course, like horrified that she'd misstep with Rowan, but I was just like, what?
The secondhand embarrassment is so real. Also, I want to know, did this just happen and then they both just went back downstairs and slept in the same bed? Can you imagine? I would never emotionally recover from this. When I read that they didn't kiss, honestly, I was so mad. Especially, okay, you cannot write this and then not follow through. She waited for him to pull back, but he just stared at her, stared into her that way he always did. Friends, but more, so much more. And she'd known it longer than she wanted to admit. How can you freaking write that and let them kiss? Okay? SJM is mean. She's mean and she's bad for this and she's wrong.
I agree.
I really thought this was going to be like, oh, finally enemies to lover. And then the air went out of my balloon so fast. And he had to say it in the worst possible way. He couldn't be like, I'm sorry, I'm just not ready. Or I don't think I can do this. Instead, he was like, don't touch me like that ever again. You know? Okay, like those are very different messages. Because if he would have been like, I'm sorry, I'm not ready yet, that implies to Aelin, okay, the door is open. He's just still working through his hilarious shit. Instead, he was like, bitch, get away from me, you know? Like, what is she supposed to think after that? And then he's confused the next day. Like, why doesn't she want me to touch her? I'm like, oh my God. Rowan is an idiot, okay?
I was King Prawn. I'm bringing the music. When that happened, I was like, I
bet you were. I could just see you get like in that part, be like, ooh, ooh, and then like,
I was reading so fast during this chapter, guys. I was like, yes.
You were flying.
Yes. Oh, yeah. My Kindle reading time probably decreased by like 80%. It was like turbo mode. And that happened. I was like, oh, I was about ready to throw my Kindle across the room, honestly. So, ugh, so mean. SJM is mean. You're right. Anyways, as Rowan leaves, Aelin considers that he's an immortal who had lost his mate and she'd been foolish and should have understood that, though she'd seen his eyes shine with hunger for her. It didn't mean he wanted to act on it. Didn't mean he might not hate himself for it. So, those are of course fair considerations since we know Rowan is still affected by Lyria's death, but this is where I really kind of had my thought that maybe the reason he pulled away is because he like realized something in that moment, or maybe he too felt the same feeling and then he just like freaked out. I don't know. I guess we'll see.
I think it's a combination of several things. I think he feels guilty about Lyria, and he knows it's probably not the best idea considering she's his queen and Karanam, and they are bound together for life. Okay, so if that goes badly, they're stuck with each other. Also, it's probably not the best time for distractions, with the Vol running around and the word keys just out in the world. And then, of course, I think he's honestly just afraid of being vulnerable. He's barely even been friendly to anyone for 100 years since Lyria's death, let alone intimate. So I think he just panicked and he fumbled it. He fumbled it hard. Fumbled it harder than Arobynn giving up a word key.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
A swing and a miss.
Scene change to our long-awaited revenge on Arobynn fucking Hamel.
Woo!
Lysandra had been waiting for the perfect time to kill Arobynn, but we get another world-building detail related to the gods when she thinks that sound from the storm outside was a blessing from... I actually didn't listen to the audiobook, so how did they say Tamis? Temis?
Temis? I would say Temis. I don't remember, because it's only mentioned that one time.
Temis it is. A blessing from Temis, goddess of the wild things, who had once watched over her as a shapeshifter and who never forgot the caged beasts of the world. Lysandra had received a note from Aelin stating, "He's all yours," and she had considered it the only gift a queen could offer, a no-name whore with a sad story. I'm really glad that Lysandra and Aelin ended up becoming friends. I'm sure to most this gift doesn't really mean that much, but for them it quite literally is everything. They both suffered immensely at the hands of Arobynn, and this gift was both the best thing that could be offered and the best thing to receive, because Aelin literally doesn't have anything at the moment other than this, and killing Arobynn will get Lysandra the one thing she needs most, which is her freedom.
See, but she won't really be free, though, because she's still anchored to Madame Clarice because of her debt. But I do think the gift is the closure over the loss of Wesley. Is finally being able to close that chapter of her life and everything she's experienced at the hands of Arobynn.
That's true, yeah. Despite how invaluable Lysandra had been to this entire plan, she reflects on how Arobynn had failed to detect any of her involvement because he had never thought otherwise of her vapid and vain behavior. Never bothered to.
Arobynn learned a lesson the hard way. Never, and I repeat, never underestimate someone.
We also learned that Arobynn had realized that with Rowan, Aelin was no longer afraid of him. With Rowan, Arobynn was utterly unnecessary, and that led him to immediately making plans to have Rowan killed. I sound like a broken record at this point, but truly, Arobynn is awful. Everything just goes back to that idea that Arobynn probably did love Aelin, but it was too mixed with control, power, and obsession to be anywhere near normal or healthy.
And ultimately, I think Rowan made the same quote-unquote mistake that Sam did. He took Aelin's attention away from Arobynn. And although I'm glad Arobynn is dead, personally, I would have loved to see Arobynn and Rowan go head-to-head.
Ooh.
Let the melons crushing begin.
Not to mention, Arobynn is just a psycho, and Lysandra thinks the night he'd killed Wesley, he'd slept like the dead, unaware of the moments when even her iron will couldn't keep the silent tears from falling.
That's so heartbreaking to read.
Oh my gosh, I know. And messed up. He does that stuff like a daily task.
Yes.
No. He's like,
have I done the most awful thing I can do today? Check.
Yep. With some reassurances to herself that she would find love again, and that she was doing this for Wesley, Sam, Aelin, and for herself, she easily slit Arobynn's throat. And I was like, damn, that was powerful. I shouldn't be thrilled for something so gruesome, but I totally am. I love some good old revenge, and I am really glad that Lysandra got to do this in the end.
I am totally here for Lysandra's healing arc. I want it. I love it. I need more of it.
And with that ends chapter 44, moving on to chapter 45. This was a very brief chapter with Dorian. Back in the glass castle, things are mostly the same. There is a man being interrogated by the king for information about where the rebels are hiding.
The man remains anonymous in this chapter, and there are absolutely no hints or descriptions about him to even help us speculate on who he might be. I double-checked, but there's literally nothing other than that he's a man. Specifically, it's described that it was a cruel-looking device that was fitted onto the man's face. I'm assuming this is a mask of some sort, and I wonder what special hell this mask is inflicting on this poor man. Now that I've in this mindset of no detail is too small to go all in on, I'm like, is this mask important? Is it just like generic torture? Is it going to come up again later? But mask alert, because it's mentioned here.
Yeah, well, we already know that the king is working on other special projects. Like he's having the witches make something that we don't know what it is yet, but he's always referencing some project or thing that he's working on. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a torture device or just like another potential way to blend like the Valg with humans and power, but kind of like what he was doing with the rings and all of that stuff. Dorian is forced to taste the man's pain, but per usual, there was nothing he could do as the demon shoved every bit of delight it felt into him. All in all, this just shows the king is onto the rebels and is doing everything he can to find and stop them, and things are not going well.
Yeah, poor Dorian. Poor Dorian.
Moving on to chapter 46.
Aelin received word that Arobynn was dead, and Turin, Harding, and Mullen requested her immediate presence at the Assassin's Keep. Aelin, and Rowan all pile into a carriage and head that way. During the carriage ride, Aelin couldn't stop thinking about Rowan's words, "Don't touch me like that." It was awkward as fuck between the two of them in the carriage. In a way, I actually thought this was kind of funny because I was just thinking about it from Aideen's perspective and just how he has to be so uncomfortable because it is so awkward. And I realized so much of this set of chapters, Aelin is a hardcore third wheel. There's Rowan and Aelin, and Aideen's just like, "Hi guys, I'm here. I'm important too." Yeah. He's just witnessing all this weird sexual tension and just these weird minding conversations, and poor Aideen's just in the corner by himself. As they pull up to the keep, Aelin closes her eyes and breathes in deeply and thinks, "One last time, you have to wear this mask. One last time, and then you can bury Celaena Sardathian forever." There was something really poetic about this to me, that now Aelin can truly be done with Celaena Sardathian. Celaena experienced so much pain and loss and devastation, and I think never having to, quote unquote, be her again will give her the closure she needs to move on. I really think so.
I think so too.
After putting on her Celaena Sardathian mask, she told Aideen and Rowan, "Don't get in my way." And then she swept from the carriage and stormed up the steps of the keep and kicked open the door. And something about kicking open the front door just plays out so badass in my head. Honestly, Celaena Sardathian is kind of terrifying. I think I'm going to miss her just a little bit.
I loved it because I felt like it was very on brand for a Celaena/Aelin thing to do. And it immediately made me think of that line in Calm when she goes to rescue Chaol, where it said dramatic entrances were practically her art form. Because she's always just had a dramatic flair to all of her shenanigans.
Yes.
And I love that.
See, she should have went into acting.
Ugh, totally. Overall, though, what a journey it has been to get to this point. And as we've been saying, the first part of this book really did feel like a return to who Aelin used to be in order to wrap up unfinished business, which she has now accomplished. I would imagine there's a lot of mixed emotions because it's been like 11 years of Aelin's life. Despite many of the terrible things that occurred, there's also been, good memories and events as well. So from a reader's perspective, it does feel a little bittersweet to close the Celaena Sardathian chapter. So
it does. I mean, we've loved Celaena Sardathian for thousands of pages at this point.
True that. All right, that ends chapter 46. Moving on to chapter 47. Aelin puts on an A-plus performance of Selena Sardathian as she roars, "What the running hell happened?" upon entering the keep. The three musketeers, Tern, Harding, and Mullen, are there, and Aelin demands they immediately start explaining what happened to Arobynn. I thought it was interesting that she notes Tern had probably hoped she'd killed Arobynn that night they ran into each other at the vaults, because ultimately I don't think any of the other assassins necessarily liked or respected Arobynn. They mostly just feared him and didn't have a choice but to follow because they were also indebted to him.
I'm sure the Tern thing is also because he wanted to take over the guild too, so there's some power struggle there. But also love the Three Musketeers. That's gonna live rent free in my head. Also, I thought it was super funny when Tern, Harding, and Mullen looked at Aiden and Rowan, and Aelin was like, "Never mind the guard dogs." Something about describing some of the most lethal, powerful beings in the world as guard dogs is hysterical to me.
Lysandra is also putting on a perfect performance as the innocent and scared courtesan as she sits slumped in an armchair and swears she had nothing to do with the murder. I also felt very smug to see Aelin tell Clarice off and say, "Did I ask for your goddamn opinion?" when she tries to defend Lysandra. Tern and Harding give their own assessing looks and questions that Aelin knew were designed to test how much she knew and whether she'd been involved, but they go on to check Arobynn's room.
So I have a little issue here. Aelin says, "Show me where you found him now." She doesn't say bedroom because she wants full plausible deniability. For all she knows, he choked on a shrimp in the dining room. Okay, she doesn't know what happened to him. But it goes on to say, Tern gave her a long look considering her every word. And she thinks a valiant effort she thought to try and catch me in knowing more than I should. But moments before that, when Lysandra is sobbing and denying her involvement, Aelin says, "Why the hell should I believe you? You're the only one with access to his room." So I feel like that's a little bit of a slip up in a way. I mean, you could read it as Lysandra could have let someone into the room, but I feel like a little bit that's, depending on how you interpret that, you could go either direction.
That's true. Yeah, definitely tricky. The scene, of course, is not pretty with Arobynn's blood spewed everywhere, but I found it very smart of Chaol to have left a boot print on the floor. One that Tern does, of course, observe as likely being from a big meal. A big meal.
A big meal.
And then he also looks over to Rowan's boot to confirm that they didn't match. Through the conversation, we learned that the real reason Aelin had stayed up on the roof of the warehouse was so that Tern could confirm that she couldn't have killed Arobynn because he says, "I saw you at home all night. You were on the roof of your house and then you went to bed." They head back down to the sitting room where Aelin releases Lysandra since they had no reason to kill their biggest client. But Clarice, feigning grief, says they'd like to stay to hear what Arobynn's will said, since the master of the bank would be arriving shortly. And I was like, Clarice, you really are a little grubby turd. She probably already makes enough with her courtesan business.
Oh my God.
And the only reason she cares to stay is to see if she got any money.
Literally, how much more money could you possibly need? At some point, what do you do with that much money?
Greedy. Everybody's just greedy. As expected, the master of the bank does show up, and we finally learn what all of those trips to the bank were for. And because you're dying to hear it, yes, Addison, you were right about Aelin taking Arobynn's money.
Oh my God. You have no idea the absolute joy and delight I felt reading this. Obviously, I am delighted. I was right about Aelin getting his money, but also how utterly satisfying she gets everything and can use it for Terrasen. And now she gets to screw Clarice too. Like, that really worked out in every single aspect. But oh my God, when I read that, I was like, I'm so proud of myself. I finally figured something out.
Yay.
I was like, yes.
Everyone except Aelin is dumbstruck to discover that Arobynn's will was that the sole beneficiary of all my fortune, assets, and holdings should be to my heir, Selena Sardathian.
Woo!
Tern immediately demands to see copies, but the banker verifies that the signature matched the other verified copies of the vault, and were all dated from 3 months back when Aelin would have still been in Wendelin. And I was like, oh my God, OMG, why? What a satisfying twist. It was great to know that the only thing Clarice got was enough money to cover Arobynn's remaining debts to her.
Yes. And she's like, you are in the well, see?
I wonder if it would have been too suspicious if Clarice wasn't in it.
It would have been.
I guess it would have been, yeah. If she would have just been like, F you get
nothing.
Like,
plus, it also creates a situation where Clarice can put a lien against the assets because she needs to be paid. Obviously, it was a relatively modest sum, but that way it's resolved immediately.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Now, the official property owner, Aelin's first order of business was to kick Clarice and Lysandra out of the house, and her second task was to finally confront the three musketeers about their involvement in getting Sam killed. Aelin says, I don't know what role you played in his death, but I will never forget the sounds of your voices outside my bedroom door as you fed me the details about Rorik Farron's house. Was it easy for you three to send me to that sadist's house, knowing what he'd done to Sam and what he was aching to do to me?
To be honest, I kind of forgot that there were a lot of people involved with what happened to Sam and Aelin, and so I'm happy that she was able to make them pay for their involvement. Also, I kept cracking up thinking about the poor master of the bank. He has to know what this place is, and I would be scared shitless, okay? I loved it when it said the master had recoiled in his chair, trying to make himself as invisible as possible in a room full of professional killers.
Yeah.
I just picture like this little old like man, like some giant 80 and Rowan, Aelin, turn Harding Bullet, and you're just like, I don't want to be here. My job requires.
I know. I also thought it was funny when he first gets there, he's like a little bit relieved to see Aelin because he knows her. But then he's like, wait a second. You're also really fucking scary. And everybody else is here too. This is not a safe place to come to. Which actually, if anybody had picked up on that, that could have been kind of suspicious for her. The fact that the banker knew Aelin.
Well, they probably all bank at the same place, though. It would make sense that she has a bank account there. So does Arobynn, and she's been banking there for a long time. But yes, possibly.
Yeah. Anyways. Turn denies knowing anything, but tired of his bullshit, Aelin proceeds to kick them all out of the keep since their outstanding debts were now owed to Aelin, making all of their clothes, weapons, client lists, and the guild hers. And since these three saw fit to accuse me of murdering my master, I say they're out.
I also love when Turn is like, what will we do? Where will we go? And Aelin responds, I hear hell is particularly nice at this time of year. Like, damn, spare no mercy.
Turn continues arguing, and Aelin decides to offer them a chance to buy the house, the land, and the guild for an astronomical price if they could muster up the proof of funds in the 3 hours it would take the banker to drop the papers. They do end up agreeing, and Aelin still kicks them out until the sale takes place. Again, just brilliant. Not only did she free herself, she also got Arobynn's assets, but now she's actually been able to cash it all in so that she can use the money freely in Terrasen, right? The money's through this sale is not just going to be like tied up. She like will have free access to it. After kicking everyone, including the servants, out of the keep, Aelin, Rowan, and Idian head down to the basement to see Arobynn's body. Rowan is thoroughly thrown off by the rage and violent nature of Selena Sardathian, as is Aelin, but more worse was how he hated that he couldn't reach her when she was that person, hated that he'd snapped at her last night and had panicked at the touch of her hands. Now she'd shut him out entirely. This person she'd become today had no kindness, no joy, even if he knew that it was just an act. Honestly, what did you expect, Rowan? Like, no girl is going to be fine with someone straight up dodging her attempts at intimacy because it's embarrassing. But you know.
Thank you.
I was wondering if Rowan is actually alluding to the idea that Aelin shielded him out, unintentionally, of course. So it's much harder on him because he really can't feel her in the same way he typically can. I don't know. I'm still on my whole Rowan knows something that he's not stating yet about the nature of their relationship. But stupid Rowan.
Stupid Rowan. I'm just confused that he's surprised she's avoiding him. Because that would be so awkward and embarrassing. If that were me, I'd never want to see Rowan again, let alone have him be like touching me the next day. You literally like, don't touch me like that. Like, I just can't get over that. You know what I mean? I know we talked about this earlier, harsh, but I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with it.
Neither am I. Having reached the dungeons, Aelin turns around and waits for the light bulb in their heads to go off. Adian's lights up first, and he realizes that Aelin had switched the wills. She goes on to reveal how she baited Arobynn into investing in the pits to recoup the money he'd lost from the vaults, which has now become their money. Rowan also adds that all of Aelin's trips to the bank must have been to learn the layout and to eventually break in so that she could destroy and switch out the original copies of the will. And I was like, oh, okay, this must also explain maybe why she'd smelled of ashes. That was like the one thing that I thought was kind of weird, and it's just kind of like stuck in my head.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll buy that for now.
Honestly, thank God she did all of this and it worked out, because the only thing that Arobynn was going to give her from this will was the amulet of Orinth, which is obviously just ironic because he stole that from her in the first place. And so he was just giving her something that belonged to her.
He was like, you're welcome for something I took from you.
I know, the freaking audacity. But Rowan also pieces together that the will is how Aelin confirmed Arobynn actually had the amulet, though she only gives him a dismissive shrug, which he is annoyed by. For as much as I complained about why she couldn't fill anyone in on anything, I do get it now. Her plan relied on emotional believability as much as the physical actions that she needed to take. So she needed to ensure no one knew about her plans with the will so that obviously the reactions would sell the story. Aelin
I agree.
Looks to Arobynn with the final words, I hope the Dark God finds a special place for you in his realm. And then she uses the sword of Orinth to chop off his head. I also love the line that says, when she raised her head, there was only icy determination in those remarkable eyes, a queen exacting justice.
It reminded me of the killing calm she always talks about feeling.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So obviously Arobynn's death was way overdue, but I just love a great revenge story. And I guess you can kind of consider this her first official act as like Queen Aelin Lethanius.
Arobynn's execution.
And now her Selena Sardothrian era has come to a close, and she can fully embrace her path forward as Aelin Ashriver Galathinius.
On to the clock tower, baby. Let's knock that clock tower down and save or kill Dorian. Probably kill him, but you know.
Oh, I hope not. I'm still holding out hope for that. But yeah, that concludes our analysis portion. And now we just have our favorite moments to share. My first favorite quote was, he would probably have been even more scandalized to learn I'm not wearing any undergarments beneath this dress. The table rattled as Rowan's knees banged into it.
Of course you love that. My first favorite moment was obviously fuck Arobynn Hamel, but the whole chapter where they're in the sitting room and they're having this exchange back and forth, lies and truth, truth and lies. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I love how his character is written. It's written so well. Yeah. He's such a dynamic character and I loved reading their chapter. Honestly, it was really engaging. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm happy he got, but it was a really good chapter.
Yeah, I agree. And then this was a shared one between us. It said, she would find that love again one day, and it would be deep and unrelenting and unexpected. The beginning and the end and eternity. The kind that could change history, change the world. And
Lysandra, I want that for her.
I do too. I'm really excited to see how her role in this story progresses next.
Yeah, like where does she go from here?
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, another shared one between us. One last time, you have to wear this mask. One last time, and then you can bury Selena Sardothrian forever.
Oh,
I know. I'm like, you can do it.
After that, I had a funny one. It's from Aelin. It says, I don't even know what to say. You should have told me so I didn't act like a gawking fool up there.
That does not encapsulate his role for this entire set of chapters so perfectly. Gawking third wheel.
Yeah, pretty much the entire time. I'm like, when are you guys going to start letting Aelin in? Because, yeah, you know.
Poor Aelin. Man, I'm surprised he doesn't hate Rowan. Rowan took the blood oath. He basically took Aelin, and Aelin's just standing there, hands in his pocket. You know? My next favorite was Rowan stood with his queen in the rain, breathing in her scent, letting her steal his warmth for as long as she needed. And I was like, oh, but then he ruined it with, don't touch me like that. So
I know the one nice moment before it went south from there. And then the last quote that I really liked was at the very end when It says, when she raised her head, there was only icy determination in her eyes, a queen exacting justice.
Oh,
Finally. Long overdue.
long overdue.
And yeah, that now concludes our episode. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. As always, we're so glad that you found us. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and check out our social media pages to keep up with us on a daily basis. That's all we've got for you guys today. So stay nerdy
and live a little.
We'll catch you all next week for Queen of Shadows, episode 8. Bye!
Bye! And stay tuned for some bloopers. Oh, I'm Madison.
I put you first.
You did. You did. I was waiting for you to go, I'm Lorraine. And I was like, and I'm Madison. And then I just saw him first.
I'm just going to say all of that again because I messed it up anyway. So I paused too long. Okay.
Okay. Wow. New year, new us, baby. Arobynn, not but, and. Not but, and. Ooh, it's okay. Words are hard. Okay. The Blackstone ring and pocketing. And she swept from the carriage and stormed up the steps of the keek. The keek
and keeked over
the keek and keeked the door.
Aelin puts on an A+ performance of Selena Sardathian.
Sardathian.
Aliens lights up first, and he realizes that Alien did it again.
That's going to be a thing for the next 3 books.
Oh my god, I know.